Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man with a YouTube channel that buy and resell appliances gets a weird washing machine. So, what did you get? Because I got a black washing machine.
My name is Mark, and I run a small YouTube channel where I buy old appliances, fix them up, and sell them at a profit. I run it with my wife Jane to supplement my income. And even though I only have a few thousand subscribers, it is a very rewarding experience. I'm a repairman by trade, and Jane is a sanitation worker. So we see things discarded all the time. You'd be surprised how little hassle tolerance people have. They're so quick to discard anything and everything. So fixing things up and seeing people get inspired by my work has been what got me through the COVID pandemic. Or at least it was, until recently, our first time buying something from out of state. We'd heard about a large sale, just a couple hours drive, where we could get a whole haul of appliances for cheap. It was the owners of a combined restaurant / bed and breakfast who was selling off pretty much everything as the building was being torn down. They weren't going out of business or anything, but they figured they'd get rid of some of their older stuff. Mostly refrigerators and dishwashers, but also a sink or two. I'm an amateur plumber at best, but you shouldn't underestimate the price you can get for a fancy sink. We drove up with a trailer and started elbowing our way forward. There were at least 2 other crews there, along with a dozen cars from curious passersby. We'd gotten there just before 10 a.m., but a lot of the yard was already picked clean. The kitchen stuff was completely gone. What remained were mostly washers and radiators. Sure, there were plenty of furniture and knickknacks, but that wasn't what we were there for. If you got a niche channel, nurture it. As one of the other crews got away with the last industrial-sized freezer, I found myself looking over the washing machines. Most of them were really new and in perfect working order, but there was one who stood out. It had a small note attached to it, simply reading, "Useless," and a smiley face. It was a pretty standard machine, probably from the early 2010s, but it was completely black. The plastic had been chipped and the front hatch was completely broken off. Jane checked it out. It was perfect for the channel. The owner practically gave it away. Apparently the thing came with the building and was already broken. They hadn't cared enough to just throw it out, so they'd put it in storage. The thing hadn't worked for over a decade, so I figured I'd have a lot to do. Still, it looked sleek, and after fixing it up and adding some detail work, we could probably make a nice profit. The color underneath the grime was stunning. Solid black. Beautiful. We also got some smaller appliances for cheap. A cyan-colored 6-slice toaster, a retro-style microwave, and a blender. Had we known there'd be so few things left, we would have skipped the trailer. We hosed off the washing machine, loaded it up, and put the rest of the small appliances in the back of our car. When we got back home, I did a quick checkup on the washer. I usually do a pre-recording check just to see if it is something I think I'll be able to fix. Most of the damage seemed superficial, and I figured I could fix the hatch with a few 3D printed spare pieces. Jane figured she could do something about the color and add some fancy details. In the right room, it could almost be beautiful. Part appliance, part art deco centerpiece. I spent a week fixing up one of the toasters for a shorter video, while we prepped the work on the washer. I was having a busy week at my day job and was fully booked, Tuesday to Thursday, so I didn't have much time to spend on the channel. Fixing up the 6-slicer was a good middle ground, and it turned out great. We decided to keep it, but figured we could probably get at least $90 to $120 for it. Once I signed off the final recording with the usual like and subscribe shtick and got to the editing, I was suddenly excited to get started on my next big project. I had a good feeling about the black washing machine. We could make something good out of it. Jane helped me finish the editing on the 6-slicer, and we got back to work. We started filming the following week. I did the thing where I pretended the washer was donated to us from a fan, and that I'd never seen it before. Then we opened it up and checked the interior. I hadn't actually checked the interior that closely before, and I noticed some glaring issues. There was a lot of gunk clogged up in the inner pipes. and the inlet connections were rusted straight through. The agitator was a bit loose, and there were cracks in the outer hub seal, but the water pump was flawless. I was afraid we'd have to order some special replacement parts, but we got away cheap. I had most of it in stock, or could get it from the hardware store. This thing would be a cakewalk. Over the following days, I made a list of what needed to be fixed, and we filmed it in short burst sessions. We usually just make sort of a montage with some insights along the way for commentary. We talk more about the process rather than the details, but this time we made an extra effort. The whole video would probably clock in at about 25 to 30 minutes. Step by step, we fixed it up, and the 3D printed replacement parts for the front hatch fit great on the second print. The lock worked fine, and there were no leaks in the outer hub or the inlet connections. I got away with using the replacement parts I already had, so we finished it in about 3 days. Jane was trying her best to find a color that matched the original black, but she was having some trouble. We couldn't find what type of color it was from the manufacturer, as this model wasn't sold anymore. It was a Canadian brand from Newfoundland, and I couldn't help but wonder what kind of trip this washer had taken to end up in the backwoods of Michigan. I fixed up the chipped plastic edges with a lot of heat and a lot of sandpaper, and I noticed that the black color seemed to get more intense the deeper I worked the plastic. I showed it to Jane, and she was just as confused as I was. We decided that instead of repainting it, we would just go over the plastic thoroughly with sandpaper and more heat. It was surprisingly easy to work with, and the layer underneath was just solid jet black. Jane worked on adding some Art Deco style flourishes with gold spray, while I fixed it up with some LED lights for the buttons. We prepared for the first test run. We set up 2 cameras and put one of my old t-shirts in the washer. I put it on a low temperature quick wash. We immediately noticed something was wrong. The first thing was the noise. It made a low rumbling noise, like there was a strong electric current running through it. Every 4th second I could hear a gulping sound, like the water was coming in waves. It was a weird sound to hear from a washer, almost like it was regurgitating the water. The biggest problem came soon afterwards. The water was completely black, like ink. The program ran longer than expected, and when it finally finished up, my t-shirt was completely black. Not even gray or some other miscoloration, but completely ink black. We filmed the entire thing, and it made for a pretty decent scene. My surprise was genuine. We ran a second test, thinking we got the gunk out of the pipes, even though I could have sworn I already had. We ran it again, this time using one of my boxers as a test subject. Jane made a joke about them needing a wash anyway, as we watched the washer fill up. Same gulping noises, same rumbling, and the same inky black water. My boxers were rendered completely black. I spent the next 2 days trying to find the problem, running various off-camera tests. Every time I'd get the same result. Rumbling, gulping, then the black water came. I tore the thing apart looking for the cause, but couldn't find anything. By this point, even if there was something clogging the pipes, it should have washed out. The first weird thing I noticed about the machine was when I checked the water coming out of it. It wasn't black. There was nothing wrong with it, it was just black while still in the machine. I was at a complete loss for words. There was something that filtered the water coming in, making it black, and something that filtered it going out, making it regular again. It didn't make sense. There was nothing in the machine that could have caused that kind of effect. I even checked the tubes again, but there was nothing. While running test 14, I put in an old pair of jeans, only to realize my old wallet was still in there. There was nothing in there except an outdated ID and some membership cards. But still, I didn't want anything to get stuck in the washer. We waited for the program to run its course, and unsurprisingly, the jeans were rendered completely black. Impressively so. That's when I checked the wallet. All my old cards, black. This is when I figured something wasn't right. Jane and I decided to pause the recording while we figured this out. Over the following days, I tried replacing several parts, only to get the exact same result. Gulping noise, black water, the whole shebang. I also noticed that the spray-painted details that Jane added slowly started to peel off with every wash, as if the color itself was rejecting it. We tried adding it as plastic decals, paint, spray, but it all just withered and fell off. My LEDs just stopped working. I noticed the washer ran really hot when used. like really hot. The plastic was so hot that I could press my hand against it and see the plastic bend to the outlines of my hand. The metal parts in the back were hot enough to fry an egg. Still, it didn't use that much power. It didn't make much sense. We measured the power use during the low-intensity program, and it was surprisingly low, lower than most eco settings on modern washers. I mean, if it wasn't for turning clothes black, it cleaned them really well. By now, I was having a hard time understanding what was going on. One night while Jane was cleaning up the dishes, I fiddled around with one of the black cards I'd gotten from the washer. The black had soaked into the plastic. It wasn't just a coat of paint. An idea struck me, and I went to my computer. The card had an RFID chip, and I wanted to see if it still worked. I got my RFID reader and blipped the card against it. My computer screen instantly blacked out. It wasn't just the screen, though. The entire computer turned itself off. It started to smell like burned plastic, and I stepped away. A few seconds later, a black ooze started pouring out of the DVD tray. The graphics card fan was going crazy, making a high-pitched noise like it was going to explode. Jane freaked out and got the fire extinguisher. I was just frozen. That computer set me back about $1,800 2 years ago, and now it was just sitting there, fuming. My files were backed up on an external drive, but I wouldn't be able to render or edit my videos for a while. I didn't even know what to say to my followers on Twitter. The whole situation was absurd. I just stood there with the black card in my hand as Jane drowned the computer in foam. Jane and I had a long talk. I wanted to get rid of the washer and just not think about it anymore. But Jane figured this could be a break to something bigger. We decided to try things out and keep filming our attempts. Instead of giving up, we doubled down. First, we checked out the manufacturer and sent a few emails. Apparently, they had never sold a black version of this model of washing machine. It was supposed to be eggshell white, and a few were mint green. They'd never sold a black one, though. The customer service people were happy to help us out. They seemed a bit curious themselves, and they asked for the serial number. They told me where to find it. Once I knew where it was easy to spot. It was 8, just 8. That was the serial number, just an 8. I had to send a picture to the customer service rep just to prove I wasn't joking. They had a really hard time believing me. They'd never seen anything like it. Meanwhile, Jane was trying to wash different things. Blankets, pillows, sheets, they all turned into a solid, unified black color. Complete coverage. As a joke, she tried putting in a teddy bear. It didn't just turn black, all small plastic parts of it did as well. The eyes, who were small white plastic beads originally, were completely black. Even the stitching and, when checked, the fluff. Every single part of the teddy turned completely midnight black. The eyes didn't even reflect light anymore. They'd turned matte. Exasperated, Jane put the teddy away and threw in one of her old flip phones. I tried to stop her, but she was getting frustrated. "There has to be some sense to this," she said. "Some purpose." We stood next to it during the whole program. Gulping noises, rumbling black water. Once the hatch clicked open, we picked up the old phone. It was surprisingly intact. Solid black all the way through, but the screen still worked. All icons were nameless, along with the background. Jane shook her head. Apparently, the phone hadn't been charged for years. It shouldn't work, but it did. Later that night, just past 2 a.m., I was woken up by a strange sound. It sounded like some sort of bell, but as if run through an underwater filter. It was clear, but haunting. Jane woke up just as I got up. She asked me what the hell was making that noise, and I didn't have a good answer. There were black footprints in the hallway. The teddy bear was gone, and my wardrobe stood wide open. Every single black t-shirt, my black jeans, my black boxers, it was all gone. Pillows, sheets, blankets, everything, gone. The footprints were leading me straight to the washer. The sound was coming from the old flip phone, lying on the bathroom tiles right next to the washer's hatch. A drowning ring signal. I bent down to pick it up, but recoiled. Something inside the hatch was moving. I stumbled my way out of the bathroom and fell backwards. My eyes were fixed on the hatch. It opened. A black hand reached out towards the phone and pulled it into the washer with a snap. The hatch shut and clicked. Jane rushed out with a flashlight. The hatch was lit up, empty. empty, but there was still something there. I knew it. Something was staring straight into me, and it was angry. We had threatened, trying to repair it away. This was a way of showing that it was ready to defend itself. I could still hear the wailing bell noise from the phone echoing through the pipes. The next morning, we threw the damn thing away. Jane wanted to destroy it, but I couldn't work up the courage. We got rid of it and hurried back home. The black footprints were still imprinted in the floor, and we had cleaning to do. Once we got back home, I started scrubbing the floors. Jane called me over. At the end of the bed was the black teddy bear, resting comfortably. I don't know what this is or what it means. Is this a warning or a peace offering? Should I get the washer back? I'm at a loss, and Jane is starting to have panic attacks. The footprints just won't go away. Sometimes I swear I can still hear that drowning bell.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man seeking therapy during COVID lockdown finds himself being manipulated by the person he's seeking help from. So, what would you do if he wasn't there to help?
I had a lot going on during the COVID pandemic. My dad passed away from an unrelated illness, and lockdown was driving me mad. I'd always been a bit paranoid, but being locked inside turned it all up to 11. My home was converted into a makeshift prison, an asylum where I was supposed to be my own caretaker. I didn't have much trouble switching to remote work. I usually worked exclusively with overseas clients anyway, so the only thing that really changed was the software, the chair, and my pre-rendered background. But as days turned to weeks, it became increasingly obvious that I wasn't okay. I'd sleep anywhere from 2 to 12 hours a night, and with no discernible pattern. I'd wake up crying without knowing why. Sometimes I couldn't even open the bathroom door, as I tricked myself into believing there might be someone on the other side. Having lost my dad, I was feeling more mortal than ever. The news, the internet, and the radio were all saying the same thing. Going outside was the end, and at that time in my life, I couldn't handle more death. Everything feels different when you're forced to stay inside. The walls seem closer, and your chest tightens. It feels like the air grows thinner, warmer. You can feel your breaths enter your lungs. They don't sustain you. Your knickknacks and doodads look like souvenirs from a place you can't go back to. A mockery, like notches on a prison wall. Sometimes when I slept, I'd forget what was going on. Waking up, the nightmare would fall on me like a rock, knocking the air out of my lungs. I'd grow increasingly scared of going to sleep, as if that rock would grow heavy enough to crush me. And yet, it was all better than going out there, among the others. I couldn't take a step outside my door. Even if the lockdown was to be lifted that same day, there was no way for me to convince myself that everything was going to be fine. Nothing was fine. And it wouldn't be for some time. My colleague, Dana, was the first to take notice. I'd been up for about 53 hours. She pulled me into a chat after a remote meeting, telling me I looked sick. I melted. I poured my heart out about anything and everything, barely forming a coherent sentence along the way. If someone asked me to recall what I said that day, I could only hazard a guess. Dana tried to understand, but must have realized this was above her pay grade.
I get it. It's a lot right now. It's a lot for all of us,
She said.
It might be time to talk to someone.
She reminded me that we had an agreement with one of our main partners, Hatchet Pharmaceuticals. They handled our health insurance, which also included mental health treatment. In fact, they'd expanded on it since the start of the pandemic.
They got a remote counseling program.
She said, holding up a brochure.
Just use your company login and sign up for a session. What do you think?
There wasn't much to say. I was willing to try anything. I filled out a questionnaire and got a response within a couple of hours. I was sent a link to a calendar app and got to pick a name from a list. There were a couple of short descriptions by each available counselor, giving me a bit of insight into what kind of person they were. There was a man named Gareth who had an empty calendar. It was strange. See, each counselor could be sorted by seniority and number of patients, and Gareth was at the top. He was, by a good margin, their most experienced employee. So how could his schedule be so empty? I signed up for a session with Gareth the next day. It felt like a stone settling in the pit of my stomach. I was nervous, and I didn't even know why. Maybe it was the prospect of a changing routine that scared me. Or maybe it was the thought of opening up to a stranger. Either way, it affected me way more than I thought it would. I went back and forth on canceling the whole thing. I wandered around like a cat on a hot tin roof, feeling the walls closing in. I ended up on the floor, gasping for air, curled up like a ball. I just wanted it to be over. I took a day off work to have my first session. It was just past lunchtime. I'd prepped a cup of Earl Grey and a microwaved cinnamon bun as comfort food, but that wouldn't stop my hands from shaking. I got a pop-up on my screen with a blue sunflower logo. Clicking that connect button felt like dipping my heart in ice water. Gareth popped up in a little video feed. He was a man in his late 50s with combed back salt and pepper hair. He had bushy eyebrows, a trimmed goatee, and a white shirt with a black tie. It looked like he was in a large office with wide open windows. It looked pleasant, airy.
Good afternoon.
He smiled.
I'm glad you could make it. It's difficult to take that first step on a new path.
It really is, I nodded.
But I'm glad you did.
He said.
Now how about we talk a little bit about who we are? Would that be all right?
We took turns talking about ourselves. We shared our names, our professions, our age, and a little bit about our families. Gareth was 57 years old and had worked as a mental health professional for 23 years. He had 2 sons who lived in Philadelphia, just like my mom. We spent some time talking about how we'd adapted to the pandemic and how we felt about having to stay inside, wear masks, and the way it affected the way we looked at other people. I barely noticed it, but Gareth had accidentally made me reveal my issues without me even realizing it. He was good, real good. I had told him about how difficult my life felt, that I felt trapped in my own home, but that the outside was even worse.
You're describing it like you're sailing a frying pan on a sea of fire.
Gareth said.
Like there's no way out. That must be stressful.
He was spot on. It felt hopeless, like spiraling down a black drain, but he just smiled and nodded.
We can work with this.
I decided to see Gareth twice a week. I could book any time I wanted. His calendar was wide open. I wanted to ask him about it, but I didn't. There was a part of me who didn't want to get too personal. Gareth seemed nice, but he was also just doing his job. I was asked to sit by an open window during work hours as an exercise, a way to get used to the sounds of the outside world. It was nerve-wracking. Every passing car felt like a freight train, and every stray voice from a passerby felt like a threat. But slowly, day by day, it turned to background noise. And with that, the world started to feel a little bigger. The walls breathed again. Over the next few sessions with Gareth, we tried a couple new exercises, leaving the window open when I slept, leaving the front door unlocked during work hours. And by our 4th session, he asked me to try something new.
About half an hour a day, right before you go to bed, I want you to open your front door.
He said.
Stand or sit there, taking in the sounds of the city.
That night, I tried it. I opened the front door and sat down. I tried to mentally record everything I saw, one thing at a time. The walkway down the road, the ill-kempt playground. I counted the cars, the windows on nearby buildings, the light posts, the parking meters. I put some conscious thought into observing things from a new perspective. But through it all, the one thing that made me want to go back inside was the sight of other people. It wasn't just the threat of a spreading pandemic. People seemed nefarious to me, ill-willed, dark silhouettes roaming about in the night, their wants and haves a mystery. If the news were an indicator of anything, everyone was struggling to make ends meet. Everyone was a potential assailant. At best, they were indifferent. Perhaps I had it all wrong. Maybe it wasn't the virus closing my throat that was the greatest issue. Maybe the real problem had been people all along. Looking at the nameless shapes staring at me from the windows across the street, that sentiment felt more true than ever. The more sessions I had with Gareth, the more I realized my priorities were changing. I was letting go of my claustrophobic tendencies, but I couldn't help but to feel threatened by the people around the neighborhood instead. Gareth seemed very interested in this, asking me to describe my feelings and mapping out my day. It was very thorough, and I got new exercises to deal with my anxieties. I was asked to record my nightmares and worries. Another day, I was asked to write down stray thoughts on paper. Another day, we had a session about how to practically deal with intruders and how it made me feel that there might be people out there who wanted to harm me. We talked about the many ways people could disappoint you and how easy it was to retreat from the public. But I didn't get a good read on Gareth. It seemed to me like he wasn't really trying to treat me anymore. The exercises he suggested did little but to zoom in on the worst feelings that lingered in the back of my mind. My anxieties were emphasized, not examined. But one thing that remained was my nightly routine to sit with an open door, looking out over the neighborhood. I'd stopped mapping the objects I could see. Instead, focusing on the neighbors, strangers walking past in the night. I had convinced myself that they wanted my money, my car, my brand name clothes, all of it. I had this feeling that if I were to leave my place for a night, I'd come back to it being ransacked if I came back at all. It was easier to just stay inside. One of those nights, however, I saw something. On the other side of the ruined playground, there were a series of row houses. One of the doors were left wide open. I could see the shape of someone standing in the doorway. I could have sworn they were looking straight at me. They didn't move. Were they trying to figure me out? Was this a warning? Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about this potential someone. It's as if I could see them everywhere, and Gareth wasn't helping. He was asking me to describe them, both physical attributes and their actions. It became a bit of a hyperfixation, and I couldn't stop myself from seeing them in the corner of my eye. But the fact was, something was happening out there. I'd see that same person every night, staring at me from across the street. I'd hear footsteps outside at night. Sometimes, when I slept, I swear I heard someone messing with my letterbox. It felt ridiculous, and I knew I was exaggerating, but was it really all make-believe? It was a Tuesday when, once again, I logged in to have a session with Gareth. The weather was rough, and some construction work had cut off my high-speed internet. I had to rely on spotty mobile Wi-Fi, and the approaching storm didn't help. Gareth connected, but it took a bit longer than usual. He had the same half-smile as always. I noted that he seemed to have good weather, which was a bit of a surprise. I thought he lived in the area.
Mr. Martin,
He said.
I'm glad you could join me.
I froze. I checked my webcam, making sure it was working properly. The resolution was a bit spotty, but there was no question about it. My face was clear enough. My name is not Martin. Not only should Gareth know that, but he could also see and hear me. It was very strange. I was caught off guard. Of course, I said. I wouldn't miss it. Gareth sat completely still, looking straight ahead. He was silent for almost a full minute, then sort of sprung to life. I thought that maybe the storm was interrupting the Wi-Fi, but it seemed to be working fine. Maybe there was an issue with Gareth's calendar app. Then again, if that was the case, how come he didn't recognize me?
Have you been keeping up with your exercises?
He asked. Yeah, I said, yeah, I have.
So let's hear it then.
He continued.
What did you learn?
About what? Gareth leaned back in his chair and chuckled. It was a warm sound, but there was something hollow in it. The screen froze, and in a heartbeat, he was back to leaning forward, looking straight into the camera.
About your target.
I barely had to say anything. This Martin person had come to Gareth for an issue similar to mine, something he had diagnosed as general anxiety disorder. It seemed like Gareth had poked and prodded Martin in a way that focused their issues on an external threat. Other people. A neighbor? I stood up, stepping away from my laptop, but leaving the conversation running. I peered out my living room window. What do you think I'll do to this neighbor? I asked.
We've talked about this.
Gareth responded. I know, I repeated. But I want to hear what you think.
I'm afraid you might murder them.
I looked back at the screen. Gareth just stared straight ahead, not moving a muscle. No emotion, just a matter-of-fact statement. I felt the moisture on my tongue evaporate as something sour crept up my throat. And what do you think about that, Gareth? I asked. He didn't blink. A full 20 seconds of silence passed. The only sound I could hear was my own heartbeat.
I think you're going to do what you need to do to heal.
He said.
And I want you to heal, Mr. Martin.
At any cost?
Of course.
There were a couple of people outside passing by in the night. Someone with a thick coat, another with a trucker cap, one with a backpack, another on their phone, some with their hands in their pockets, someone holding something dark, a gun, a knife. But no one stepped up to my door. No one came knocking. But there was someone standing in an open door on the other side of the playground, looking my way, like they'd done on so many other nights. Maybe they were making a difficult decision. The meeting with Gareth ran out of time, and I dove onto the net. My hands were shaking so much I could barely spell. I checked it all. The name of the program, the pharmaceutical company, Gareth. Everything and anything I could get my hands on. There wasn't much to see. Paper trails came to sudden ends. Names were scrubbed or removed. Most people working on the platform were hired as outside consultants, and there was no way to trace what kind of money they were moving or where. And Gareth, he was a puzzle piece. For everything he'd told me, none of it was specific enough for me to look up. There were no names of his children for me to track. No address where he lived, no mention of his previous place of employment. Running out of options, I called up my colleague Dana. It was 11 p.m., but I had to get answers. Dana was skeptical, but she could tell I was upset. She wasn't enthused about getting back in front of her computer, but I got her to look up a couple things. It didn't take long for her to find something curious.
Hatchet has a company policy about billable consultant hours.
She said.
They have a maximum number of billable hours. If someone goes past this, they need to be hired as a full-time employee.
How does that relate to their remote platform?
Gareth and a handful of others go way above this average. They ought to be full-time employees, but there's nothing that says they are.
So they're bending their own policy a little, so what?
There'd be a paper trail.
She continued.
We have a close association with them. We got access to their meeting protocols. Policy exemptions need to go through the board. So the only way I see it, there is only two ways to make sense of this.
She took off her glasses and leaned into her camera, lowering her voice.
Either this program is run illegally or these people don't exist.
I thanked Dana and got back online. There was no way I'd be sleeping that night anyway. A stray thought hit me, and I got back on the calendar app. Even now, in the middle of the night, Gareth was available. I booked an immediate meeting with him. That gave me an idea. Using my phone and a separate login, I checked his calendar again. According to it, he was free, despite me having booked that time already. So, I booked him again, 2 calls at the same time, and at the same time, a connect button popped up on my phone. I clicked both buttons at once. Gareth popped up with the same smile as always, sun shining from his open windows.
Good evening,
Said Gareth on my computer. Everything all right? Asked the Gareth on my phone. There were 2 of them. They were talking at the same time. I turned off my phone and leaned back. My pulse was rising. I had no idea what I was even looking at anymore. I'd been paranoid about people for weeks, maybe months, but there'd been a mystery in front of my face all along. You're not real, are you? I asked.
Of course I am.
He laughed.
I'm right here. Is this what you need to discuss? Are you having issues separating fantasy from reality?
No, I spat back. No, you don't get to do that. I'm not imagining this.
Then I don't know what to say.
He shrugged.
I'm as real as can be. I'm right here.
Then how come you're saying 2 different things on 2 different screens, Gareth? Gareth didn't answer. He looked off screen as if considering something. He looked back up at me, still smiling.
I'm sorry,
He said nothing.
but I have an urgent patient issue that I need to resolve.
My laptop shut off. Seconds later, my phone went black, and someone was coming up the stairs. Before my heart could skip a beat, something slammed into my front door. I raised my arms as if to shield myself from the sound, and a second later I heard the hinges buckle and snap. Then, Something broke. Something splintered. I rushed to my kitchen, passing the entrance. There was someone standing by the broken door. I only saw them in passing, dressed in dark, ill-fitting clothes. I grabbed the first sharp thing I could get a hold of. Armed with a kitchen knife, I backed myself up against the wall, knocking over a few doodads in the window. It was a long way down, but if I had to, I'd rather have a shot at breaking a leg rather than dying. But I couldn't get the damn thing open. A stranger stepped into the hallway. About 6'3", dressed in a navy blue hoodie and a black leather jacket. Leather gloves curled around an honest-to-God machete. A face obscured by a burlap sack with holes poked out around wide-open green eyes. Shoulders heaving with excited breaths. He rushed forward, grabbed one of my kitchen chairs, and threw it across the room. It broke against the wall, knocking over a photo. Shattered glass covered the floor. Something whistled past my left shoulder and slammed into the kitchen tap with a metallic clang. It made my ears screech. I steadied myself against the kitchen table, and it was casually tossed aside with a crash. I headed straight for the door. For the first time in months, I didn't consider my anxieties. I had to get out. Then, something cold grabbed my neck. Leather gloves. I reached back with my kitchen knife, but lost my footing on the broken glass. I was sent tumbling to the ground, landing hard on my shoulder. I looked up to see a raised machete. And those sparkling green eyes. I had to say something. Anything. Mr. Martin. It was the first thing that came to mind. The machete hung in the air, ready to fall. He hesitated. You're Mr. Martin. You're speaking with Gareth, right? There was no response, just excited, heaving breaths and a shaking machete, frozen in place like a living statue. He's tricking you. United States. He's tricking us. He's not real, Mr. Martin. He's not real. Something clicked. A heavy boot stepped on my wrist, kicking my knife away. The machete crept closer, cold steel resting on my chin. I felt the warmth leave the tip of my fingers.
I win.
A hoarse voice wheezed.
I got you first.
I'm not playing any games. I'm not. For the first time, he blinked. He tilted his head. I continued. I'm not playing Mr. Martin. You can't be first if I'm not playing.
You were trying to get me first.
No, I wasn't.
You're lying.
The tip of the machete pushed into my skin, shaving a couple of hairs and cutting a 2-inch gash across my jaw. Pain like sharp ice spread across my face. Then a noise. A loud electronic noise. My phone must have come back on. Martin stopped. He was having trouble hiding his glee. He was giggling like a schoolboy. And this was funny to him, if anything.
Answer it.
He chuckled.
I want them to hear.
I took my phone out. It was Dana.
Answer it.
He repeated.
Put it on speaker.
So I did. Dana's voice came through. Something about what we'd talked about had kept her up as well. She had always been the kind of person who couldn't let go of a good mystery.
You gotta hear this.
She said, going straight into a rant.
I think I got something.
I held up the phone for Martin to hear as Dana explained her findings. It turned out the program wasn't supported by our healthcare deal. It was just registered as a support feature, and it was included in the same paperwork. It was never literally spelled out as a health service. Looking into the fine print, it was specified as a technical support feature.
You get it?
She laughed.
They're not a mental health care provider. They're hired to handle data collection.
What? I whispered.
They're gathering data. That's their primary function. Data like mental health problems, stress-related issues, ages, locations, trends, dreams, wants.
Or how fast they can get us to kill one another. Dana laughed. I looked up at Martin. He wasn't laughing. The machete pierced my phone as he flicked it across the floor. His eyes sunk. He didn't look as excited anymore. His shoulders slumped with a loud sigh.
You're not playing.
He wheezed. No, I'm not. He took his foot off my arm. I could feel the warmth running back into my fingertips. With the casual stroll of someone heading to the supermarket, he headed for the exit. Without looking back, he shared a few parting words.
I would have won.
Over the next few days, we lost access to the program. Dana and I couldn't do or say anything. Turns out they had baked more than we'd anticipated into the terms of service. It explicitly stated that it was an experimental service and wasn't to be used as a substitute for conventional mental health care. It was all just data collection. Some artificial program meant to get people talking, engaging them and pushing them to tell them more and more and more. Not aiming to help them or guide them, but to get them to return talk and stay engaged with the platform. And this Martin guy? Turns out there was no neighbor with that name. There was, however, a man who'd been found dead in the row house across the street, slashed to pieces and kept in plastic bags in a bathtub. Someone had been squatting there since the beginning of the pandemic. Someone who the neighbors described as a strange man with bright green eyes. I think Gareth was just keeping this murderer engaged, poking him to go further, to do more, and to stay occupied. I don't think it was a conscious decision. It was just algorithms. Oddly enough, I think my paranoid tendencies have eased. As the pandemic came to an end, I figure something as absurd as this whole thing won't happen to the same person twice. No matter what I run into out there, I don't think it's going to be another killer. It's freeing in a way. If I can survive this, I can survive.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man with a string of bad luck gets a job at a prison when a strange man seems to know him all too well. So, whatever you do, stay away from the blue-handed inmate.
A few years back, I had the worst streak of bad luck in my entire life. My dad, my one living parent, got run over at a pedestrian crossing. My fiance left me, I lost my job at the warehouse, and I had to move to the outskirts of town because of a sudden rent spike. My one stroke of good luck was my friend Gareth. He mainly worked the commissary at a nearby prison, and he told me they were looking for more people, mainly night crew, but the pay was solid. There was a trial period and 2 weeks of on-the-job learning, but it was all paid for. In my position, how could I say no? So I started my job as a corrections officer just outside of Tomskog, Minnesota. The place was partly owned by a private company, but it was basically the same logo you'd see all over town. Hatchet Pharma has a finger in everything around here. I got the uniform, I met the inmates. I went through the routine, and I got to know who to keep my eyes on. I had to fire my taser after 3 weeks on the job, but that was pretty much the highlight. Most of the time is just sitting around, waiting for something to happen or breaking up loud conversations. It's not as dramatic as it sounds, but you gotta be ready for when it counts. In December of 2021, I was assigned to a new route. One of the people working with inmates in solitary confinement had to quit over a health scare, and I was next in line to take his place. It was still a night gig, but in a deeply disturbing part of the jail. Now, I won't paint it to be something it's not. Isolation is just a whole bunch of people keeping to themselves. Usually, not even that many. Sure, the Tomskog facility has a slightly higher solitary capacity than normal, but we're talking 10 to 20% at most. Still, you need someone there at all times. You never know what they can come up with, and they're trickier than they look. There was this one guy at the end of the hall who just gave me the creeps. The other guards called him Mary, short for a longer biblical name I could never remember. He always broke the lights in his cell, and he was rumored to be extremely violent. Even in solitary confinement, he had to wear shackles. Every time he received his food, he had to put his hands out and have the shackles removed so he could eat. That's basically the only part of him I ever saw, his hands. The cell was always pitch black. The guy used to be an academic. Mary had 3 doctorates, but one day he just snapped. Killed 3 of his students. He also had some kind of chemical burn on his arms, leaving most of the skin on his hands discolored. Silver poisoning, possibly. Even his files were strange, stamped with a sort of blue flower. Most inmates had a stamp on their file, but he was the only one with a sunflower. The guy refused to eat during the day, so I was the one to feed him on the night shift. Every time I removed those shackles, I'd see those gnarled blue hands reach for me, or the tray, whichever. One of those nights, we were having beef stew Nothing fancy to look at, but the thing smelled divine. I brought him some bread on the side, a little Jell-O box, and a bottle of water. Everyone else was fast asleep, apart from a newbie who couldn't stop crying at the end of the corridor. Same procedure as last time, I said, hands up front. Those elongated fingers slowly slid out, as if giving me an invisible fruit. The shackles clattered. I put down the tray, got the keys, and started twisting the locks back and forth. These were always a pain to deal with.
You're going to let me out.
Mary said, "Oh,
I need you to, so you're going to.
yeah, I don't see that happening, buddy." I unlocked his shackles and fetched his tray. He took it, but lingered for a second.
You're going to.
He said with no hint of a joke.
It's already decided.
Well, no one showed me that memo, I chuckled. You good in there?
Someone said bad things happened to you,
Mary said.
and that's why you're here.
Well, that makes two of us. Have a nice dinner. I walked away, but couldn't help but to look back as those long fingers slid back inside the dark room. Gave me the creeps every time. And sure, I had to get the tray and cuff him back up in a bit, but that was just part of the job. The next night was fish sticks. Not too shabby, but far from fresh. There were only 3 people in solitary that night. 2 guys who tried to kill each other, and Mary. Always Mary. As soon as I approached, those blue hands slid back out. I had to look away. There was something about the texture of his hands that made me feel weird. Like they were always a bit too slick. Like a thin cover of soap. This time, he didn't skip a beat.
You're going to let me out.
He said,
It's already decided.
"You keep saying it, but this door seems just as sturdy today as it did yesterday."
If you come in, you'll see why you're going to let me out.
"You mean if I open this door without any kind of backup or supervision?" "Yeah, I got a pretty good idea why you'd get out if I did."
That's not it.
I unlocked his shackles and he took his tray. It disappeared into the darkness, but Mary kept talking.
You being here is proof that I made it.
He said,
That I'll get out.
"I'm not following."
They told me you lost a lot of things. Your dad, your girl, your apartment.
There was poison in his words. Deep, seething poison. I'll be honest, I wanted to break his goddamn hands when he said it. But what bothered me more was where he'd heard it from. There was no one around to talk to him. And as a rule, we didn't talk to inmates about our personal lives. Neither our own, nor that of other employees. Someone must have slipped up. "Look, that's personal," I said. "That's none of your business."
Then how do I know your dad got hit by a white Corolla?
I banged on the door. I didn't even know why. It was just this instinctual reaction to shut him up. But of course, that just made him laugh. How the hell did he know? It had been a hit and run, and the color of the car was only a footnote in the police report. "That's not funny," I spat. "And you're not making any new friends by being an asshole."
I don't care, little man,
He continued.
because you're going to let Mr. out.
"Not on my goddamn life." I took the tray back from him before he finished his dinner, and I shackled him right back up. He didn't resist. It shut him up for a while, but it was a faint victory. I asked to be transferred to another shift, but there just wasn't any other people available. Hiring was rough. We were basically on our own. If we lost one person to sickness, we'd be shit out of luck at that point. So, no, there was no option to switch. It couldn't be done. I didn't want to go back to Mary. I really didn't. I didn't know who was talking to him, and I didn't like what he was saying. I'd checked and double-checked, and there was no mistaking that white Corolla. It had gone 60 on a 30 bias street and killed him on impact before disappearing down a dirt road. The thing was just gone. Police said it might have been deliberate, that it was too fast to be an accident. And in my mind's eye, I could see blue hands on the steering wheel. When I walked up to Mary's cell with a tray of meatballs and mashed potatoes, I was genuinely scared of what he might say. Every word felt like a threat. Could he really say something to make me let him out? What if he could? What would it be? "Hands out," I said, knocking on his door.
You're not letting me out tonight.
He sighed.
I know that, but it's gonna happen.
Yeah, I shrugged. That's all I want to do.
Did they tell you what I did? How I did it?
I got a pretty good picture.
Helium poisoning. Painless asphyxiation. They didn't feel a thing.
I didn't respond. I just took off his shackles and gave him the tray.
I'm not a monster, you know.
He added,
I just do what I have to do.
"Eat up and leave the tray," I said as I walked off.
Maybe ask your ex about Beverly.
He shouted through the slit in the door. I could almost see his lips moving.
I'm sure you'll find it an illuminating conversation.
I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to talk about it, and I didn't want to think about it. But goddammit, there was something there. In the last fight we'd had, she'd shouted that name. Beverly. I didn't know a Beverly, and at that moment, I didn't care. But it was such a specific name. The chance that Mary just picked it up on random was improbable. So the next day, before my shift, I decided to give my ex a call. Things had calmed down, after all. There was a cold greeting and even colder small talk. Finally, she just called me out.
Just tell me what you want.
She asked. "I want to talk about Beverly," I said. "You said her name once."
What, you're getting remarried? Want to bury the hatchet?
No, what?
You want me to forgive you? Give you my blessing?
What are you talking about? There was a moment of silence. She scoffed.
The skank you're dating.
"I'm not dating a Beverly," I said. "Nick, never have."
Don't give me that shit. I saw your emails, her videos, her Insta.
Look, I don't know any Beverly. She screamed her username and cut the call. I got online and looked her up. Beverly was maybe 8 years younger than me and absolutely stunning. She'd only been active for a few months, where she'd upload a sort of daily video blog. It was heartbreaking. In every post, she talked about the issues of being the other woman. A vlog kind of thing. Daily outfit posts, memes, a sort of strange mix. This is the woman she thought I'd been involved with? Through some kind of email? It didn't make sense. And how the hell did Mary know about this? This haunted me. I didn't know what to think, and I felt myself coming back to Mary in his blue hands. I had this constant sense of him being with me, looking at me. It felt like I was missing something. I could feel that strange, slick texture as the hands wrapped around my neck whenever I let my mind wander. I could feel his presence in the backseat of my car, riding along with me. And once at a stop sign, I heard him clear as day, right behind me.
You're gonna let me out!
But there was no one there. The next time I went back, I skipped the tray. We were gonna figure this out. I finished my coffee and thundered down the hall, ignoring the other inmates. Mary had some explaining to do, and I was goddamn terrified of what he was gonna say. But I needed to hear it. "You're gonna tell me what you know right now," I said. "I've had my black coffee, and I'll break your goddamn hands."
You let me out, and it'll all be clear.
Chuckled Mary.
I promise. It's kind of written on the wall at this point.
I smacked my nightstick against the door. "No more fucking games."
Then come in. Teach me a lesson. Open the door.
I calmed down. Maybe this was how he got to me, tricking me. That wasn't gonna work, no way.
Your shift starts at 10:15.
Mary said.
You take your coffee black, and you came here the first thing you did. Hold on.
He shuffled off into the back of the cell. There was a strange scratching sound, and he was gone for a solid minute. I just listened, trying to figure him out. I shone a flashlight inside, but he'd hung up a sheet over the slit in the door. I couldn't see anything without going inside.
So, there was your dad. You reacted to that. Then a Beverly. That worked. What made you lose your last job? Was it, let's say a failed drug test? Yeah, that'll work.
What the hell are you talking about?
And you don't do drugs. Probably some kind of error. Maybe a few. Poppy seed pastries for breakfast. Those things can give a false positive.
I just stood there, mouth wide open. The morning of the mandatory drug test, I'd had 3 pastries with poppy seeds. The bakery down the street were giving them away as a promotional event. I got this awful pit in my stomach. Like he knew more about me than I did. Like he was about to tell me something horrible. Like he was standing right behind me, just soaking up my fear.
So that brought you here. I'll have to figure that out later. Maybe you know someone here.
He continued. "Shut up," I said through the door. "I'm telling you to shut up." I looked over my shoulder. There was no one else here. Why was I feeling watched?
Calm down.
Mary said.
We're getting to the end. You're about to let me out.
Never, I spat. You're gonna fucking rot in there.
Don't you understand?
He yelled back.
The fact that you're here proves that I'm right.
How? That doesn't make any goddamn sense. And he told me everything. Mary, or Meridian, was given an opportunity. If he followed a very specific set of events, he would be given a great gift.
Non-locality,
He said.
but you need to dissociate hard enough. Basically turn yourself crazy enough for reality not to make sense anymore. Or rather, for you as a person not to make sense to reality. The other way around.
As a part of this delusion, he killed 3 of his students. He burned himself with chemicals. Then, seemingly as part of his plan, he willingly went to jail.
Years of darkness.
He added.
Isolation. Like being in a sensory deprivation tank. I need it. I crave it. Then I'm done.
And all for what?
To be unbound. No causality, no rules, non-linearity. And the fact that you're standing here is all the proof that I need to know that it is going to work.
And why is that?
Don't you get it?
A blue hand slipped out of the slit in the door and pointed at me.
I did this to you. I put you here. Someday, you will let me out. Because if you didn't, I wouldn't get you to come here. And that time is drawing close. I don't need this darkness anymore. I feel it. I'm done.
That's impossible, I said. That's literally impossible.
Then why are you sliding down the wall? Feeling sleepy?
I hadn't even noticed. I was nodding off, right there in the hall. I tried touching my face to see if I could feel anything.
Did you? Yes.
Mary said.
I drugged you. I couldn't have if you hadn't told me about the black coffee, but now that you did, I could. It's on the list. It's all on the list, and what's on the list is going to happen.
I don't understand.
Imagine you could travel through time.
He chuckled.
Not today, but someday. And you promise yourself that you're gonna put a rose outside your door on this very day, in this very present. And when you open your door, the rose is there, then you would know that you're gonna get that power. You know you will come here someday. Then it all comes down to strength of will, to force yourself to remember all that you're going to do, and in the correct order.
That's not... An image flashed in my head. Blue hands on the steering wheel of a white Corolla. A man paying the bakery to promote some pastries. A woman being paid for a bit of internet theater by an unknown benefactor. There were dozens of people standing at the end of the hallway. Thin, emaciated men. Men with long fingers and blue hands. I blacked out. I woke up in the staff room with a nurse looking into my eyes. They gave me a checkup and sent me home to rest up. They gave me a few days off just to make sure. I didn't know what to say. I had my keys, and Mary was still in his cell. If I was the one to let him out, all I had to do to make sure that didn't happen was to stay away. That'd ruin his plans. So, taking a few days off seemed perfectly fine. As I was about to leave, Gareth met me in the parking lot. He jogged out to say goodnight and see if I was okay.
Look,
He said.
I know you hate that shift, but don't worry about it. They're moving him, and I've heard talks of approving a shift change. He'll be someone else's problem, and you'll be back in cell block D.
What do you mean?
They heard how much he was messing with you,
Gareth said.
and decided it just wasn't worth it. They're moving him. We can't lose you.
What? Why?
Gee, I thought this was good news.
No, I don't know. I don't know. Gareth patted my shoulder and sent me on my way. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain it? Did I even believe it? I got in my car and took a deep breath. A strange chemical smell. I noticed something on the passenger seat. A letter. I took a deep breath and opened it.
Thanks for the help.
It said.
This one's on me.
A little smiley face and a $100 bill. I just stared at it. Suddenly, there was a loud bang. For a heartbeat, all I could see were blue hands, simultaneously smacking my car. I shot out of the driver's seat, but there was no one outside, just an empty parking lot. Still, I couldn't help but feel watched. My pulse pounded behind my eyes, almost popping a blood vessel. They were out there. He was out there, watching me from the dark. He was still getting out. I knew he was all around me, unbound. He could stab me, push me over, whatever. He'd be there and then not, and I'd be helpless. I got this intense sense of paranoia washing over me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I just dug my fingers into my hair, trying to force my mind out of that dark pit. This was my doing. I'd let him treat me like shit, and because of it, they were going to move him. During that move, he'd get out. He must have planned it, and I couldn't do shit about it since I was off duty. I took another look at that $100 bill, and the thought occurred to me. There was something I could do. I went to the gas station. I came back the next day with a backpack. I showed my credentials and told the gatekeep that I was there to fetch something from my locker. It was fine. Danny knows me. I got in on the day shift and waved at the others. A few of them asked how I was doing, what I was doing, the regular chit-chat. All smiles and waves. Prison transfers takes place in the early afternoon. It'll only be a short walk, but that might be all he needed to escape. I used my keys to get past cell block D. I knew I'd get stuck on camera, but I also knew that the prisoners were out in the yard. No one was watching the tapes. Not this close to lunch. I walked straight into the solitary ward and all the way up to Mary's door.
Wait,
He said,
you're here?
"Yeah.
No, that doesn't make any sense.
Send me home then. Have someone shoot me. I'm waiting."
No, wait, that doesn't... Hold on!
There was a shuffle as Mary hurried into the back of his cell. I couldn't feel them here. We were alone. I unzipped my backpack and took out a door stopper. I shoved it under the door. That thing wasn't moving anytime soon. I stepped over to the fire alarm and pulled the handle. The emergency doors opened with a violent blaring siren. Every door swung open, but Mary's. I was lucky that time. No one in the solitary ward but Mary and I.
Hold on. What are you doing?
I took out one more thing from my backpack, a can of gasoline. I shoved it through the slit in the door, tearing down the sheet he'd hung up.
Oh, you're killing me. That's what this is?
Yeah. And I see no little blue hands trying to stop me. So I guess it's working.
Maybe you're missing the point. Maybe you're not doing what you're supposed to.
And how exactly is that a bad thing if it keeps you from getting out? Half a can was enough. It was leaking under the door. I took out a gasoline-soaked rag, lit it on fire, and tossed it through the slit. For a split second, the room lit up. The walls, the bed, even Mary. I got a short view of the room as it was, and what he was doing in there. He had drawn things on the walls and the floor. White Corolla, Beverly, poppy seeds, black coffee. The wall was full of things. Arrows, lines, and squares. All related to me. These were all things he was going to do when he got out. And he was so convinced that I was the one to let him out. So convinced that it had all started to happen. And then there was Mary himself. He was more bone than man. Sunken eyes like he hadn't slept for weeks. He'd torn his hair out and bit off his fingernails. This was a completely senseless man. And he stared at me with unblinking eyes. But in that moment, as the flames started to lick him and the fire spread into the hallway, he looked me in the eyes and smiled. I just bolted out of there. Hundreds of inmates were gathering in the yard, and I could already hear sirens. I could see flames bursting out of the solitary ward. Before the firefighters could get there, one of the walls completely collapsed, and I saw him. Just for a brief second, I saw that emaciated man standing in the flames, holding his hands out like he was receiving a gift. The chemicals in his arms ignited with a bright green. They'd burned straight through the wall, and the thought hit me. Technically, he was out. He might be on fire, but he was out. And in that split second, in that heartbeat, he vanished, like snuffing out a candle. Hours later, the fire was put out. It didn't spread. Turns out that part of the jail had a peculiar type of stone that was weak to high temperatures. The stonework just crumbled. Some kind of exposure to a certain chemical. A blue one with a green flame. The construction crew had cheaped out on materials many years ago. There were no recordings. They'd forgotten to change the tapes from last night. There were no visitors' logs. Barely anyone remembered me even being there. And lastly, there was no body recovered in that cell. As I got back in my car, I just held my breath, waiting for something to happen. A knife at my throat. Possibilities passed through my mind. In another place, it all really happened. Violent images of myself getting stabbed, burned, tortured, and flayed. A world where everyone turned to ash, and I was placed in front of a throne of bone as a prize jester. Dark figures rising from the earth, tearing the world apart, breaking the ground like an eggshell. I cried. It was seconds away, at most. But minutes passed. I found a letter on the passenger seat. It hadn't been there seconds a cog. It took me a solid 15 minutes to work up the courage to open it.
You got me out.
It said with a smiley face. And there was another $100 bill.